But like, what was your response? Do you remember?
Yeah, I told you that I had also pooped my pants.
Okay, not also. I had never actually.
Oh, okay.
I had never actually
Right.
pooped my pants.
Get off your high horse. I'm sorry that I actually lived your greatest fear.
Welcome to a Healthy Push podcast. I'm Shannon Jackson, former anxiety sufferer turned adventurer, mom, and anxiety recovery coach. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. And now I help people to push past the stuff that I used to struggle with. Each week, I'll be sharing real and honest conversations along with actionable and practical steps that you can take to help you push past your anxious thoughts, the symptoms, panic, and fears. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be.
Today, I have a very special guest with me, my husband, Adam. And Adam is no stranger to a Healthy Push podcast. He actually edits every episode, and he's truly my biggest supporter. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
It's good to finally be here.
So just a little disclaimer, Adam is, of course, being very accustomed to being on the back end of my podcast and not being heard by all of the listeners. So this is definitely outside of his comfort zone, but we are going to do our absolute best. So Adam and I have been together for 11 years, and we've been married for 5. And we met when I was in the midst of struggling with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia. And Adam hugely supported me throughout my recovery journey. And we want to start by telling you guys a story. It's actually a story that was in our wedding vows, and it's just really special to me and to Adam because it really kicked off the way our relationship started and is truly how we are today with each other. So one night I was out with friends at a restaurant, and I remember just a wave of anxiety come over me. And I, of course, got in my head. I started with all the what ifs. And of course, it led to a panic attack. And I remember just feeling like I've got to get out of here. And I left the restaurant in tears, and I walked outside and I sat on a curb. And I picked up my phone and I called Adam. And I honestly have no idea why I called you, Adam, because we barely knew each other. Like, we had just started hanging out. We didn't really know each other, but I called him and I said, Adam, I just really need you to come and pick me up. And literally without hesitation, he said, I'll be right there. And within minutes, he showed up and parked his truck, and he walked across a parking lot, and I walked toward him, and I just remember he reached out and hugged me, and I just felt so calm, and I felt so much peace. And that's literally how I felt through the entirety of our relationship. He's always been incredibly supportive to me, and that story is just really special. And there's also a little bit more to it that I want Adam to tell you. So Adam, when you picked me up and we got in the truck, what did you do next?
Well, first of all, I don't know why I was just sitting at home on, if I assume a Friday or Saturday night, not doing anything, but that's fine. So I remember we went to the local gas station, and I got some strawberry milk and some Cheez-Its and some zebra cakes, and I offered you some, and you politely declined everything, so I had to eat and drink all of them.
And it's just so funny because Adam, in the cutest way, right, thought that those things would be helpful to me. And you know, if you're struggling with anxiety and panic, especially in the moment, things like snacks and especially sugary snacks are not going to do you any good. But it was the thought that counted, right? And it was
sugary snacks always make me feel better, so I don't know why you didn't jump at the opportunity, but
yeah, I turned them all down.
Also, that is probably the first and last time I've drank strawberry milk in the last 25 years. I don't know why I immediately went there, but
amazing.
I'm glad I did.
Amazing. So before we dive into the questions that the A Healthy Push community wants to ask you, Adam, I think it's important to have some context and to set the stage. So when we first met, I was pretty deep in my struggle with panic disorder and agoraphobia, and I wasn't nearly as independent or adventurous as I am today. Back when we met, where were you at? Like, what did your life look like?
Oh, so I was fully independent and extra adventurous back then. You know, I would kind of wake up and do whatever I wanted. I don't know if I had a job at that point in my life, but I don't know. I would go hiking or sit at home and watch, TV for 13 hours, or I would just pick up and I would just kind of wander around and do whatever I wanted.
Yeah,
And life was great.
It truly was for you, honestly, and I think I was so envious because I remember when I started to get to know you, it was like you lived this life that I internally always wanted to live. Like, you had packed up at an early age after graduating. You left Maine, you went out west, you skied, you traveled, you did amazing things. And I was just like in this constant state of anxiety and panic and fear, living in Maine and always wanting to see the world outside of Maine, and just felt like I couldn't. So now that you have some context, let's dive in. So the first question is, have you ever dealt with anxiety, panic disorder, or agoraphobia yourself?
Slight anxiety stuff, parking stuff, being afraid that parking lots are going to be full, like large groups of people to an extent, but mostly related to that they all have cars or are going to be in the parking lot. A lot of parking anxiety. But no, none of the actual, large items that you have struggled with in your life.
Yeah. So I can attest, Adam has this like really strong anxiety surrounding parking, and like we'll be driving somewhere and he's just consumed with worry that the parking lot's going to be full and that we'll have to turn around and we won't be able to do whatever the thing is that we set out to do. And it's just so funny because we all have anxieties, right? And like that is something that I would never get anxious about. Whereas on the flip side, all of the things that I used to be anxious about are things that you probably never, ever have even thought twice about. So we all have anxieties. Anxiety is an emotion. It's not something that you can get rid of, but you can have a healthy relationship with it. So I want to dive into the next question.
Before that, I like to throw in that if anyone out there is owning a company or something, make sure to put plenty of parking for people to be able to get there, please.
Yeah, love it. So you saw and were super close to the things that I struggled with on a daily basis. And we talked a little bit about the questions before we started to jump into this interview. And it is really hard because these things happened years ago. And like Adam's memory is just not good.
Oh gosh, no. With my ADHD, I can't remember anything. So it's like you ask me these questions and I'm like, oh, I don't remember things being bad at all.
Yeah.
Things were always great. Like we did fun things. Like I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. And it's just so funny because like, of course I remember like specifics, all the specific moments of like being on an airplane and like freaking out. And like I remember being in a train station and bawling my eyes out and having people look at me and having to explain to you what was happening. Like being in cars. I mean, it's just so funny when you're not living it too, though. It's like, of course, not as much of an impact. Like it's not something that you're constantly thinking about or consumed with. And so, yeah, Adam doesn't really remember a whole lot. I, of course, remember a ton, but the panic attacks, you saw these things, the immense fear I had while riding in cars, on planes, on trips. I would call you crying, whether I be at work or in a store or driving. But I was also really good at hiding a lot of what I was going through on a daily basis. Like, I didn't share literally one of my biggest fears with you for years, like years. And when I shared my biggest fear with you, I just remember you like literally laughing. So let's talk about this a little bit. So we had been together for years, and the fear of me pooping my pants literally consumed me for years, like years. And it took me years to tell Adam that I had this fear. And so you can imagine we'd be riding in the car and I'd have panic, and like 85% of the time, that's what it was revolving around. And like when I shared this biggest fear with you that I was so afraid that you would like judge me, shame me, think that I was crazy, like not want to be with me We were married though. No.
No, that was before.
Yeah, that was before.
Well,
But it was at the point of we had been together for years and there was
yeah.
no out at that point.
Yeah, I think we had moved back from Salt Lake at that point.
But like, what was your response? Do you remember?
Yeah, I told you that I had also pooped my pants. Like,
Okay, not also. I had never actually.
Oh, okay.
I had never actually pooped my.
You get off your high horse. I'm sorry that I actually lived your greatest fear.
But that was just it. Like, you told me literally without hesitation, like, oh, I've definitely pooped my pants in the car before. And I was like, this is a fear that has consumed me for years and that I've been so afraid to say out loud. And you literally just looked at me and told me that this has happened to you. And I was just like...
That's no big deal. I'm not ashamed of it, but I probably should be in some aspect, But
it's just so funny because, like, the things that you hold on to, the things that you give so much power and control over, if you just say them, if you just share them, if you just talk about them, like, I remember when I shared that with you, I was like, oh my God, like, I feel such a relief now. And not that, of course, it got rid of the fear, but at least it made me feel like I had some release and it didn't have as much power over me.
Well, maybe, like, I don't know if I thought about it in the moment, but we were talking about it a little bit last night, and it's just like, should I be worried when I'm on a train? Like, it's not like a crazy fear of like, oh, aliens are going to come down and, you know, it's a legitimate thing, and I never had thought about it, and, you know, it makes total sense.
Yeah, and that's just the thing is I think oftentimes when you're struggling with the specific anxious thought, intrusive thought, the fear, you think like this is something that nobody else could possibly ever think of. Like this is not something that anyone else would ever struggle or struggles with. And like it's stuff that probably a lot of people think about or have thought about or have struggled with, or like Adam, like it's actually happened and it's not a big deal. And it's like not something that you should consume yourself with, but it's so hard to, of course, when it's something that is so strong and powerful to you. But I want to ask, well, somebody in the Healthy Push community asked, do you feel like you could ever grasp what I was fully going through back then?
No, I don't think I could ever, you know, grasp what you were going through because I had never really dealt with it myself, but you know, it's one of those, I understood the signs and I understood, you know, that things were happening, even if I couldn't understand, you know, exactly what was going through your brain.
Yeah.
But it's like you hit on it before, like our first flight to like New York City, like you were fine going through the airport. Like you were nervous. But like,
I was not fine.
Well, like as a normal person flying for the first time would be, but you weren't, it didn't seem to me like you were, you know, freaking out. And then we got on the plane. And then you sat down and you were like, all right, I'm freaking out. And I'm like, well, we're on a plane and you can't go anywhere, so.
Oh, I remember that like vividly. So Adam had actually surprised me. This was my first flight that Adam's referring to. We literally flew from Maine to New York City, which is like an hour flight.
Yeah, it's like 40 minutes.
Yeah. And it didn't matter though. It didn't matter if we were flying 45 minutes or if we were flying literally for 14 hours. It was like the thought of being on an airplane and panicking on an airplane was like beyond. But you hit on something really important in that it was my first flight. Like I struggled with anxiety and panic and agoraphobia, but like it was my first flight. And so many people get anxious about flying, and it's totally natural to feel anxious about flying. Totally. And, like, that is something that you also need to remind yourself of in some moments and give yourself some grace of, like, it is completely natural to experience anxiety in many situations.
Yeah. And, I mean, at least it's, like, 10 minutes climbing, 20 minutes in the air and, like, 10 minutes, like, down. It's really, as far as first flights go, that was a pretty easy one. It's not like it was, you know, 7 hours to San Francisco or something.
It was rough, but I did it, right? I did it, and then I've flown many, many times after, and granted, many times I have panicked.
Well, now when we have a daughter, I panic too, probably just as much as you do, that she's going to start freaking out on an airplane, but...
Oh, so that, yeah, and that's another thing, like, Adam will worry about Amelia on an airplane, and I'm like, that is the least of my concern. I am just like, Amelia is doing great. Like, she's a baby, she's a toddler. Like, we've flown on 3 flights with Amelia, right? And like 2 of them were international. We went to London, we went to Aruba, and like kids are kids. I don't worry. Like, if she screams, if she cries, whatever.
For like 3 weeks. It was awful.
But yeah, flying now is like enjoyable, semi-enjoyable. Like, it would be more.
It's still not enjoyable in any way.
For me, it's more enjoyable, of course, than it used to be. But
it's fun for you.
Okay, so this next one is, I know we're probably going to get into some stuff. So in our 11 years of being together, we've obviously been through a lot, not just relating to my struggles, but do you ever feel like our relationship suffered specifically because of my struggle with anxiety?
No, I mean, I don't, again, of the points that I remember, I don't think so. Like, I assume that I got frustrated a lot and not scared, but like there were points where I wasn't helpful, and you just sit there and you're like, well, okay, and this is happening, and you try to make, the best of the situation, but yeah. No, I don't, not that I can think of.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not harboring any deep resentment or anything. Like, that's what I we were thinking about it last night. Like, I can't think of a single time when you were having a panic attack or whatever, and I was like, oh, this is horrible. Like, I don't feel like they were ever in any, high stakes moments, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I also feel like, so Adam is, an incredibly patient and supportive person, and so I think that definitely plays into this. Like, he is just super patient, and he's always been very supportive, and he is one to be quiet and take things in, and I think he did a lot of observing and just figuring out what's helpful, what's not helpful, what role am I going to play when Shannon is having a panic attack. But yeah, I mean, I don't feel like our relationship suffered specifically because of my struggle with anxiety, but I can also say that I did a lot of work, right? I went to therapy.
Oh, yeah.
I went to therapy all the time. I saw multiple therapists at different seasons in my life for different things, not just anxiety. And going into our relationship, I had a lot of stuff. I had past traumas. I had relationship trauma. I had things that I needed to sort through, but I was consistently taking healthy action and doing the things that I knew I needed to do on my part so that our relationship didn't suffer because of my individual struggles.
Yeah.
But we also, too...
Yeah, we went to couples therapy.
Yeah.
We did all sorts of fun things together.
But that was huge because when we first started dating, we, of course, like any couple, you discover things, whether you're taking past things into your current relationship, there's things that you haven't dealt with that are now, surfacing in your relationship. And Adam and I both had things. And so we both went to individual therapy, and then we came together. We went to couples therapy, which in the beginning of our relationship was hugely important. Because I didn't understand. Adam had communication issues. I had communication issues. We worked really hard, though, at that stuff. And, I mean, I think our communication now and for a while now has been really strong and continues to be strong because we consistently remind ourselves of, we check ourselves, hey, we need to work on our communication. We need to improve it. That sort of stuff definitely made it so that our relationship didn't suffer as much.
Yes.
Yeah.
It just took a little while to get there, yeah.
Right. Like any relationship and any struggles that anyone has going on. Because I had my own struggles, but Adam had his own too. And we, worked through them in our own ways. So back to the New York City example. So we had booked many flights, many trips, we are super adventurous people. I did a lot of this while I was struggling, and it was incredibly, incredibly hard on me. And I feel like there were definitely times where you got the brunt of a lot because I just was so consumed. And so did you ever feel like what I was struggling with put more responsibility on you?
Yeah, I mean, in a couple ways. The biggest one was that I just felt like I had to take care of you more.
Yeah.
Because your diet was so specialized, going back to the plain, stuff, it's just does Shannon have enough snacks? Am I bringing enough books and magazines and stuff on the plane so that Shannon won't be bored and think about stuff? A lot of that stuff is less whether you're going to be okay, like panic attack wise, because I never thought about that stuff. Like, I never planned stuff around whether you were going to have a panic attack. Like, I didn't do any of that. It was just making sure that you were not comfortable, but that you were okay in other aspects. So like directly to your panic attack, like not, I mean a little bit, but not really that much, just because I never thought about it really.
Yeah. And I know, like, we talked about this because it definitely sounds a little bit weird, but it is. Like, Adam truly, he wasn't facing it every day. And so it, of course, wasn't at the forefront of his mind. And granted, like, the person he was closest to and the person he loved was experiencing it. But he, of course, it wasn't at the forefront. And so for him, he continued to, like, do the things and brought me along. And, like, of course, for me, it was at the forefront of every single thing that we did. But I want to just explain a little bit. So Adam talked about my diet. So my diet being specialized, I have been gluten and dairy free for, like, a number of years. And so I, like, don't eat a lot of things, and I'm sort of picky. And so Adam would worry a lot about, like, whether I just had the basics of what I needed. But I also think you definitely had more responsibility because, like, you were always the one to, like, plan things and book things and arrange things because, like, I had so much anticipatory anxiety about trips and doing things, and, like, a lot of it I didn't share with you at the time, but when you'd be booking things and you'd be like, oh, we're going to go do this, or does this sound fun? And I'm like, oh, yeah, like, the adventure
I
is
was just that you were really lazy and didn't care, and you were like, oh, whatever. So I was like, well, okay, I'll plan it, and I'll go off and do it, and whatever.
No, it was like the super adventurous part of me, like, obviously wanted to say yes and wanted to do everything and wanted to jump at it. But, like, then the anxious part of me was like, you can't do that. Like, what are you, crazy? Like, he's planning that and you're just going to go do that? Like, you can't do that.
Well, why do I still plan everything now then?
Oh, yeah, that's definitely because I'm not a planner.
That's I'm fine with the role that I play in that, but...
Yeah, Adam, every trip that we take, I mean, I don't even know if you like to plan. This is probably an assumption.
It's not that I don't like to plan. It's just it's the same to going back to my ADHD. Like, it's just like lists are the only way I get stuff done. So it's like when we went to Arizona, I made a list of, like, the 10 hikes that I wanted to do. So I woke up at 6 o'clock Arizona time and was like, all right, we're going to go hiking now. Like, why isn't anyone else awake? Like,
oh, yeah, and I can't remember ever being that person. Like, it's so funny because being an anxious person, like, my past self, I feel like I should have been, like, this planner and this, and I've never been a planner. Like, even to this day, Adam plans everything, and I'm just, like, there for the fun. I'm there to go along and, like, just do the fun things and not have to plan any of it.
But I also, like, I'm not a good, like, life planner. These are very small pockets. Yeah. I'm not like, oh, I'm going to pay off my 30-year mortgage early, and I'm going to have, like, none of that stuff. This is very central, like, very small.
Central and fun and adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you obviously witnessed me having panic attacks in, like, every place, every situation. In the tough moments, like when I was having a panic attack, how did you support me in those moments without enabling me?
So, again, like we've talked about, like, I didn't really enable you much anyways, because we were already, like, out and doing things. Like, again, it's like, well, we're here. There's nothing anyone can do about it. So it's like, you can, panic, but we're going to have to, you're on a plane, like, you can panic all you want, but you can't go anywhere, so. But it's, I don't know, just, just the normal, see if you need anything, and then just be there.
Yeah.
I don't remember too much exactly, because they obviously haven't happened in a very long time, but I don't know, just hanging out, holding hands.
There was a lot of that. Like, I feel like you definitely did a good job of just letting me panic and, like, not
Oh, I have no idea what to do. I was like, well, I'm going to sit here and...
No.
Are you okay? Like...
No, I feel like you did. You learned. Like, you learned what was helpful, what wasn't helpful. Because obviously there were a lot of moments in the beginning where you would look at me and you're like, there's nothing to be anxious about. Just calm down. Just relax. And I'm like, are you
Let's
crazy?
go on this crowded subway. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong. It's just a subway train.
Oh my gosh. And I remember the one, we were in a subway and it was so busy. And I remember like just in my brain thinking, I cannot get on that train. I'm going to panic. And I started crying. And like I literally, I don't know if I said, but I remember thinking in my brain, like, we could literally walk. And it was like 20 blocks that we would have had to have walked. And Adam's like, no, we're not walking. Like, that's not happening. And so I think in those ways, you definitely didn't enable me. Like, you didn't coddle me. You didn't, say, oh, okay, well, we'll do this instead, or we'll, just stay home, or we'll turn around. Like, it was always...
I'm too cheap to get an Uber.
100%. Adam and I are both too cheap. But, like, it was in those moments where I think I felt like, you just let me panic and you didn't try to, like, help me escape. And you literally just held my hand and you talked to me. And, yeah, the moments, it was so much learning for both of us, because I think a lot of times I didn't tell you what I needed and I didn't communicate, and like I got much better at that as the years went on. But like in the beginning, I held everything in and I didn't share anything, and I just like, oh my God, I remember so many times just feeling bad for you, because it's like, this poor guy must just be so frustrated at all times. And
well, a lot of times, like, we would be like, we'd drive somewhere, like drive home, and then we'd get home and you'd be like, oh my gosh, like I was freaking out that whole time I was driving. And I was like, we were on the highway. Like, you should have told me or something. Like, you were driving.
Oh yeah, I was like the master at that.
And I was just like, well, that's interesting, but I had no idea. I'm probably glad you didn't tell me at the time.
And I'm sure a lot of people do this, right? Like, you don't want to share it because, for one, it's consuming every part of you, but two, you're worried that like people are going to think that you're crazy or weird, or that there's something wrong with you. And like, I remember, of course, it's so mentally and emotionally and physically draining to deal with anxiety and panic on a daily basis. But then when you're in the moment and you're trying to like get through this thing all on your own, when there are people around that can help and support you, and rather than just to like out with it and say it, I would literally just hold on to it and I would give it more power and I would let it grow. And like, I remember getting home many a times and just like crashing and being like dead to the world, because I had just, for however long, gone through this thing all on my own. So along those lines, there were obviously moments where you witnessed me upset and crying and angry, and there were definitely moments where you pointed out some things that I was doing that you knew, and I like deep down knew, wouldn't support my recovery, like drinking lots of alcohol and taking on too much work and just school. I mean, when Adam and I were together, we had like moved multiple places, like to different states. Like, I was always working full time and like in really high pressure jobs, and I was in school and like trying to juggle everything, and I didn't set healthy boundaries. So I'm assuming, really long story short, there were times when my decisions and things that I did were frustrating to you. So did you ever get frustrated with me?
Again, like, I am sure there were many and many times, but I don't remember much. Like, the one big thing was when you would have 2 or 3 glasses of wine, and then I think, like, your mask kind of dropped, and then you would get very angry and then just start hammering away at things that were not good. And, like, those were our, like, terrible crash course into, like, unregulated therapy that was just, like, were horrible for everyone. No offense.
Oh, no.
But they were awful.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm very glad that neither of us drink alcohol anymore.
So this is obviously like a delicate thing to talk about, but I can now say that something that Adam pointed out for years, and is that I never had a healthy relationship with alcohol, ever. I drank to feel less anxious. I drank to hopefully not panic. I drank to find a better balance. I drank to run away from deep hurt and pain and a lot of emotions. And so many times I remember Adam like having very serious conversations with me. And he saw the effects, of course, not just like the, stuff that built up, but he saw the effects of like me drinking and then the next day being super anxious and just all over the place, or even the night of. Like, it was never good. And yeah, it was so hard, and it was such a healthy decision for me to say goodbye to alcohol. And I definitely have a very, very occasional rare drink at like a wedding or an event or something, but my relationship with alcohol now is extremely healthy. But Adam definitely at times sat me down and said, hey, like this thing that you're doing, I know isn't helpful or healthy, and like you need to take a look at it, and I want to help you figure this out. And of course, if you've ever had somebody point out something like this to you, it can be really, really challenging. And I so many times remembered pushing back and being like, I do not have a problem with alcohol. Like, leave me alone. But I definitely had an issue, and it was something that led to anxiety and panic. And yeah, it was such a healthy decision for me. But I read this question and I thought to myself, did Adam ever get frustrated with me? And I was like, if I flipped this, I'm not nearly as patient as Adam. And I can imagine the amount of times that like I cried and got upset and like just, I don't know, I feel like rained on your parade. We're all human, and like we all have very human responses. And I think at times I know that you had to have gotten frustrated, because I would have too. But like, this is the very human part about us that, it's really important to work to have a healthy relationship with the person that you're with, and also support them in a healthy way. And like, to be human, to be able to be human, like we all get frustrated, not just when you're struggling with anxiety, panic, or agoraphobia. So it's just really important to, acknowledge the things that you might be doing that aren't, helpful to you on your recovery journey, and working to make some changes. And also just owning some of your stuff, right? Like, I finally owned the whole alcohol thing, and it made our relationship worlds better. Like, worlds better.
But I mean, that's good advice for anyone or any relationship or anything at any point,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So somebody asked this question, and I'm gonna let Adam answer it, I promise, but I feel like I have to preface it a little bit. So somebody asked, how did you cope with me not always being willing to go places and do things? And I think we've talked about this a lot. And for those who don't already know, so I struggled with severe panic disorder and agoraphobia, but I was never housebound. Like, Adam and I moved from Maine to Utah, from Utah to Massachusetts back to Maine. We traveled. I always worked full time. I was in school. Like, I a lot of times put on a facade. Like, I probably, quote, seemed normal and like wasn't struggling with severe panic and agoraphobia, but I was, and it was incredibly tough for me to be far from home, but I did it on a regular basis. Like, I did all the hard things, even the little things like getting in the car, going to stores, like all that stuff. But I want to talk about one of the most beautiful things about our relationship, and it's that we have a lot of similarities. We're both super adventurous. We love to travel. We love to spend time outdoors. And this is one of the reasons why I was so drawn to Adam. Back when I was struggling, I wanted so badly to be in the place that I'm in today. And you guys know I'm a really emotional person, so I'm going to get emotional. I knew that Adam would help me to get to where I am today, because I saw his love of adventure and just to live life. And I knew that love that he had for nature and to be outdoorsy and to go on adventures was just as strong as his love for me. And so I knew that he wasn't going to give up the fun stuff. And I knew that he was going to keep pushing me to do things and to have fun. And I knew that he would always support me in a loving and supportive way. And so it's like I had an accountability partner all the time, like somebody that would always encourage me to show up and keep pushing myself and to keep doing the things and to not shy away from the hard stuff. So
does this mean like when I want to go hiking in the summertime, I can wake up at 4 a.m. so there's parking that I can play this back and I'll be like, oh, you wanted to make sure we have fun and adventure. Let's go.
No, because that is not fun.
Oh, that's just me. Okay.
Oh, waking up at 4 a.m. is not fun. But yeah, I know there had to have been times, right, where I wasn't like game to do things, whatever it was that you had planned or wanted to do. Like, can you remember, were there times that you felt like disappointed or upset because I like couldn't do something or didn't want to?
Not particularly. Like, I really can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I am sure over the years there's been stuff, but
I know
I can't, like, we've done most of the hikes that like we set out to do. Like,
yeah,
most of that, like most of the ones we haven't done are just logistics. They weren't, anything to do with your panic or anything. And like, I don't know. I'm sure that there's been a few times where you're like, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. And it's just like, well, okay, that's fine. Whether that's panic or you just, didn't want to do it in general. There's lots of those things, but it's, yeah. I can't think of anything where you were like, I don't want to do this because it's going to make me anxious. Like, no.
Yeah. I mean, so there were definitely times, and this goes back to like, I didn't share a lot of things because I remember like a couple of things that you had talked about doing. Like, we were in New York and the group that we were with, and you like wanted to do this gondola ride to an island, and I was just like, no. Like, but I put it off as in like, oh no, that's like not something I'd be interested in doing right now. Like, I just don't feel like doing that. Like, I probably made up other excuses, but it was like being on a gondola with other people and like, what if I have a panic attack? What if I freak out? What if everyone sees it? What if something bad happens? And I was immediately like, no. So I was just like, oh no, that doesn't sound like a good time. Or like
but everyone else on the gondola would be thinking, wow, I hope this gondola doesn't break up here or something. Like,
potentially, right? But the other one was we were living in Utah and you like wanted to go down into this cave and you could like do swimming and stuff. And I remember just being like, no, like, I don't know. That doesn't sound, but.
I thought it was just because you don't like to go swimming. That was because of your panic?
Oh,
gosh. And that was on the Real Housewives the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, that brought back a whole bunch of fresh memories on how I was never able to do that.
Oh my God. Side note, we watched The Real Housewives. Yeah, no, that was purely like, I'm going to go down in a cave and swim. And like, yeah, just all the things that I said. Like, what if I panic? What if something bad happens? Like, how far are we away from, quote, safety? Like, all the things. And like,
there's a dock right there. Come on.
So there were so many moments where like I wanted to do them and like I just.
Well, now I want a list of other cool stuff that I wanted to do that you didn't want to do.
But this is the great part though, right, about our relationship is that, I have come so far and like we are both we have a lot of things in common, and the things that we have in common are really, really important to us. Like, they are deep rooted things that are part of our value system, like a big piece of our lives. And, being in a relationship with somebody where you share a lot of that with, I think it's a must. And of course the person has to be supportive. And I, can say I have definitely been in relationships that have not been supportive and that have been the complete opposite of my relationship with Adam. And they made my struggle with anxiety and panic so much worse. So much worse. And yeah, that's a whole nother topic in and of itself that I will do in a later podcast episode. But I think it's just really important to develop a healthy relationship and to do the hard work that you have to do together and to be supportive of the other person. Because of course, it wasn't always just about my struggle with anxiety. Adam had things that he struggled with that I supported him through too. So
Every time I talk about parking, you tell me to be quiet and that it'll be fine, and there's never been any parking problems. So.
I know I try to get you to remember the realities and that we've never once shown up to a place and not been able to park.
Except for...
No.
Okay, we parked, but we had to take a school bus with ski boots on for 10 minutes.
With a 3.5-year-old.
Yeah, I call that one a win for me, so...
All right, so let's end it on this one. What advice, Adam, do you have for those supporting someone who's struggling?
It's just a mixture of everything we talked about. Like, you have to change, like, who you are and who you're, the way you think about stuff, but not change, deep down who you are as a person. Yeah. So, like, you have to mold yourself to be supportive and everything for this other person, but not so much that you create, like a shell or a case for them where they can just sit and not get better.
Yeah.
But also not push them off of a cliff and just throw them into horrible situations one after another to try to cure them. Like.
Yeah. I think this is like the big part, right, of like just helping someone to learn and grow and like do that alongside of them. Because like you're not going to change who you are as a person. Like, I don't know, right? Like, do you feel like you changed who you were as a person to best support me?
Yeah, I think we both changed. Well, no, like my communication skills were horrible, and we did that together, and it,
But like who we are as people.
No, I'm awesome, and that's not going to change. But like, I've changed aspects of myself to make it better.
Yeah. Same. Obviously, we all learn and grow, and we do it, alongside of each other. And I would say, really importantly, the people that you need in your life, like the people you need, will love you and will support you and they'll stick around. And those are the people that are meant to be in your life. And, they can't do the work for you. Like Adam could never do the work for me, but he could always lovingly support me as long as I was taking the healthy action, as long as I was doing my part. And I think that's really the most important thing.
Yep.
All right. Maybe we'll do a future episode again with Adam, but he is definitely like, how about no? But if you guys have any questions for Adam, we can think about doing another episode, but I hope you found this helpful. And if you're supporting someone who is struggling, just immense amount of love and support to you. I know that oftentimes it might not feel like you're doing a good job, but you are doing a good job. And remember, you cannot fix or cure or get over somebody's struggles for them. They have to do the work, and all you can do is support them along the way.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of A Healthy Push. If you want more, head on over to ahealthypush.com for the show notes and lots more tips, tools, and inspiration that will support your recovery. And if you're hoping for me to cover a certain topic, be sure to join my Instagram community at A Healthy Push and let me know in the comments what you want to hear next.